All right, Micah, you ready out there?
Yeah, we ready to get started?
I think so. Why don't we go ahead and do it? And
Okay, great. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Micah, and with me today is Jenny. That is her you heard. Together, we're going to be bringing you Dear Stop It Now. My neighbor's son touched my child. Can I have him arrested? Behind the scenes, we have Lily, our administrator, helping with all our technical needs, and Mackenzie, one of our helpline consultants, will be assisting us by monitoring chat for any questions. Everyone's going to stay muted, but you can use chat to share your thoughts or comments as we go along. Certainly, if we do have time in the moment, we can respond then, but there's going to be some time set aside specifically at the end to address any questions that come up as we go along as well. Finally, just a quick note on audio. If you're having problems or you just want to improve your audio, you can dial in using the phone number and unique audio pin provided in the audio section of your toolbar on the right. And finally, there will be a brief survey at the end. And after the webinar, you should receive an email with a link to the webinar recording and the survey again. All right, so let's get started, Jenny.
great, thanks, Micah. And hi, everyone. Really happy that you're joining us. First, we wanted to put today's webinar in context. We received this letter from this woman sharing what happened to her. She was sexually abused for many years by another same-aged youth, and she writes, "Hi, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate forum, but I was abused by a male classmate from 1st through 6th grade. I hear a lot about adult on child sexual abuse, but I've only ever met one other person who has ever told me she experienced this as well, and I can't imagine we're the only ones. I don't need anything for myself here. I've had a great therapist. I just wanted to put the words out there in case maybe the conversation hadn't come up. It's a unique situation which I can't imagine that I'm alone in, but the resources or websites just don't exist for it. I truly think this is a larger epidemic that isn't being discussed just because women and men aren't finding others like them." Well, I just personally want to reassure this woman that yes, we are paying attention to child on child sexual abuse. She's not alone, not even in a rare group, unfortunately. There really are so many like her who have experienced what she experienced. You all know how important it is to include child-to-child sexual behaviors in our conversations, in our safety planning, and in our resource development. So I wanted to start off by just doing a quick review of the scope of child-to-child sexual harmful behaviors. Now, overall, in about 40% of all sexual abuse cases, a younger or more vulnerable child is harmed by another kid, often an older and more powerful youth. And this is according to some 2012 research led by David Finkelhor. And actually, we've seen a range of research citing a third to almost a half of all cases are perpetrated by another child. On our own helpline, and that's the circular chart you see on your screen, we see that of our bystander contacts, parents, grandparents, neighbors, teachers, etc., 35% of those bystanders were specifically about concerns about children's sexual behaviors. This data includes all ages of youth, and the range of these behaviors that folks contact us about, really, it runs the gamut from harmless and age-appropriate, typical play and curiosity-driven, to sexually harmful behaviors, to seriously abusive behaviors of children.
Yeah. Right, and like Jenny was saying, Sarah certainly is not alone. And yet at the same time, there's often a different reaction to a survivor sharing that their abuser was another child versus an adult. People are, by and large, becoming more informed, and I'm sure this audience understands that the potential for trauma is not isolated to only adult to child sexual abuse, but there is still an attitude that children's sexual behaviors do not have the same impact as adult sexual behaviors. But we do know that the number of youth coming to the attention of police for sex offenses increases sharply around age 12, and it plateaus after age 14. Early adolescence is the peak age for youth offenses against younger children. And while this is almost 10-year-old research data that I'm citing here, the younger the child victim, the more likely it is that the perpetrator is a juvenile. Juveniles are the offenders in 43% of the assaults on children under age 6. And of these youth offenders, 14% are under age 12. And finally, almost 3/4 of juveniles who do commit sex crimes are themselves a victim of sexual abuse.
Yeah, thanks, Micah. So let me just back up here and review what we hope are our objectives today. So putting the prevention lens on children's sexual behaviors, we want to focus on the early opportunities for intervention when there are disclosures that a younger child, and we're focusing primarily here on children who are not yet teenagers, has behaved in a harmful manner with another child, predominantly with another kid who he or she is close with, maybe a cousin or a friend, a schoolmate. And we're talking about more serious behaviors, ones that have gone beyond warning signs and have crossed safe boundaries. So always, of course, prevention means looking for opportunities. And the opportunity specifically here that we want to talk about is from the perspective of the parent whose child has been touched or harmed inappropriately by another child, or they've been persuaded to engage in some sort of mature sexual play, or who was even more aggressively threatened to perform sexual behaviors with another child. Parents and caretakers in this position are both figuring out their response to the child who, for lack of a better word, is the victim, and their response to the other child, often a kid close to the family again, who harmed their own child. So, when folks reach out to us, typically they've just found out that their child was touched or otherwise engaged in some concerning sexual way, and they're just at a loss as to what to do next. I mean, there's just so many possible reactions and feelings, all understandable. And what happens next and afterwards can really help support a shift in how we respond to children's early harmful behaviors and practice prevention overall. So we're really only skimming the surface here because we're not addressing follow-up assessments or treatment. We're not so much talking about how to follow up with helping the abusing child address his or her behaviors, but rather how we can begin to engage in a hopeful and supportive way to really make sure that this child will get the attention and help he or she needs. And just a side note, we're also not addressing sexual behaviors between siblings because that's just a whole other bunch of complications that we just aren't going to be able to include in today's webinar. So we want to talk just a bit about children's sexual behaviors, get more of a context, and then get into our responses immediately to the situation and the child who's been the target of another child's harmful behaviors. And then we're going to look at how we can communicate to hopefully engage the abusing child's own support system, most likely his or her parents.
Yeah, so there just are so many questions that parents have when they first learn about, first walk in on, or discover an incident of harmful sexual play that has been directed at their child. These are both questions about the present, like, what am I going to do first, as well as questions about the future. Is my child changed? Are they damaged? Are they going to have issues down the road? And even how to approach this topic with other people. Should I talk to other parents about this? Should I talk to their school? And who, if anyone, do I report this to? The parents we hear from are most often calling pretty immediately after finding out that something has happened. Sometimes they share with us that they're worried that their reaction in the moment of finding out what happened may not have been so calm, maybe even was angry, sometimes directed at their own child, or that they did have words already with the parent of the child who harmed their kid. So I want to read this letter. This is from Carmen. She is a mom of a 4-year-old, and she writes, "We found out that our 11-year-old nephew has inappropriately touched my 5-year-old daughter on 3 separate occasions. In each case, he told her not to tell anyone and told her if she let him, she would have more friends. I don't think his parents are taking this seriously. I told them about his behavior after the second time, and they haven't done anything yet. I'm deeply troubled with this and I'm not sure how to proceed. Is this normal? Should I call the police and file a report?" So here it is, right? Carmen is wondering how seriously she should take this. She's wondering how serious her response should be when she's discovered that an older child has done something sexual to her child, who is much younger. And, parents often wonder what's normal and what should be done when the situation involves folks who are close to them. And this audience, I'm sure you guys can see how complicated these situations potentially are. Like Jenny said, there's a range of questions, a range of feelings, and parents may not know what to do next, especially if this topic has already been discussed once before with this boy's parents.
So let's take our first poll. And we're going to start with a question that's raised in the title of this webinar. Is arresting a kid who harms another kid a reasonable response? So we want to know, do you think calling the police is an appropriate step? You'll see the poll come up with your answers, yes, no, or unsure, and go ahead and start voting. All right, we're seeing a mix of responses coming in, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's a pretty good mix.
Yeah.
Looks like we have almost everyone voted, so I'm gonna go and close up the poll. So this is what we've got. Looks like we have some yeses. Yeah, it's a pretty mixed bag. Some yes, some no, some unsure.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised at how many unsures, because this really is a complicated question, and I'm sure you all out there can appreciate this parent's question. And we raise this because it really often is the primary landing place for parents, the place where they want to do something to make this better, and this is the most obvious to them. Arrest the person who hurt their child, or notify the police to get help for their child, and maybe even for the child who harmed their own. So most parents may find that in the moment of finding out that their child has been engaged sexually, they feel completely unprepared and unsure of what to do next. Of all the things to deal with as a parent, this is possibly one of the most unsettling. Often it feels like we're dealing with an adult situation, but between children. We just generally hate to associate sex and sexual behaviors with children in any way. We may feel better able to bounce back after finding out that our child has been bullied or threatened, because that situation is non-sexual, and it's more clear because the child being bullied and harmed, there's more evidence of the harm, and they may have their own strong reaction against the person who hurt them, and typically it's not someone that they care lovingly about. And if it was an adult who had touched their child or otherwise engaged their kid, parents would be really clear. We'd all be really clear. There'd be no question about contacting the police and more.
Yeah, so this helps us segue a little bit into what I wanted to briefly land on here, which is the topic of consent. Like Jenny mentioned, today we're focused on children aged 12 and younger, and these children are all under the age of consent and therefore cannot consent to sexual activity. As you'll see in this picture on your screen, a child can give consent between the ages of 16 to 18 years old, depending on what state they're living in. And of course, there are exceptions to this rule, like if someone is in a position of power over the child, like a foster parent or a teacher, as then the law certainly does understand that consent cannot be freely given, and therefore a child cannot consent. And of course, many states also have an age gap law that may decriminalize sexual acts between close in age peers. The law also recognizes that in most cases, children, typically those under the age of 14 years of age, cannot be criminally charged or held responsible for engaging in harmful sexual behaviors towards other kids. So although we typically understand that children cannot give consent when approached by an adult or another child to engage in sexual activity, it's also understood that children themselves cannot make informed decisions about sexual behaviors and therefore cannot consent to activity that they themselves may be initiating. So as some of you suspected, and many of you were unsure about, calling the police actually would not be an appropriate response. They may not be able to be charged criminally, and this is actually not a step that would help this child learn safer behavior either.
Yeah, right, Micah. But I do want to comment that it's not that calling the police is something you shouldn't do or is the wrong thing to do, but in terms of making sure that we're addressing the needs of both of these children, getting help, support, education, this may not be the step that gets those needs met.
Right, exactly. So, although calling the police may not be the answer in this specific case, what we do know is that, primary prevention really means responding early to all the signs of cross boundaries and to all sexual behaviors involving children. But there really are a range of responses, and often we think from our own adult perspective, our adult experiences, and even adult concerns, without always pausing to reflect on the differences between children's sexual behaviors and adult sexual behaviors. But then, of course, the question really is what should be done, right? To answer, we have to remember to look at, children's sexual behaviors through the eyes of a child and not through our adult viewpoints or experiences.
Yeah, right. Although sometimes kids' sexual behaviors may look adult-like, and it absolutely can be scary or shocking to see a kid acting in a sexual way, their sexual behaviors are indeed very different than adults, right? They're motivated for different reasons, and young kids just don't have the adult perspective on what sexual behaviors mean. Often when kids play sexual games, they don't think about the consequences to the other kid, to their playmate, or that any way that their behaviors could actually be harmful. Kids' sexual behaviors are most often generated by curiosity, of course, which is normal, but they can act out their curiosity in unsafe ways. Sometimes they may have impulse control disorders, so just like they may have trouble keeping their hands to themselves when playing, and they may hit a friend, they may also have trouble keeping safe sexual boundaries. Also, a disability can sometimes play a role in a child's understanding of appropriate behavior, and we'll talk about some more causes in a moment. So as a review for most of you, we just want to pause for a moment and take a quick look at what developmentally healthy sexual behavior looks like. Since we don't talk about children's sexuality as much as we should, it's important that those of us who do work with parents and families share this information, and for parents to remember how important understanding healthy sexual play looks like to better respond early to any warning signs. Typically, healthy and developmentally appropriate sexual behaviors will be between kids who are familiar to each other and similar in age, development, and abilities. And you see the concerning behavior indicators listed above. If the kids aren't similar in age or in stature or abilities, and if there's a sense that one child is orchestrating what's happening, especially with force or threats or, in any sort of coercive way, well, then of course we have a concern. So, and also additionally, healthy play is usually more spontaneous. It's got kind of a playful element, while concerning behaviors often does feel more secretive, and there's more of a sense that it's something that had to be planned out.
Right, and so here are what some of the harmful sexual behaviors can look like. Typically, we may see older kids and teens offering alcohol and drugs and other inappropriate things like, special privileges to younger children, but we may also see the younger age group we're talking about today introducing children to sexual content, not as peers acting with a shared curiosity so much, but as a secretive and perhaps even harmful way to elicit sexual contact. Also, harmful and abusive are not one and the same. With kids, it really can be a really gray area. Things like power differences, use of bribes or threats, the level of aggression, these can all have an impact on how we think about a specific situation.
Yeah. So let's hear now from Brad. Actually, we've been calling him Brad the dad. And I'm going to read his letter. So I caught my almost 8-year-old nephew hiding in the closet with my just turned 5-year-old daughter. She told us that he, my nephew, had tried to convince her to take off her panties so he could put his mouth on her vagina because it was supposed to feel good. I have some pretty serious concerns and feel that my nephew may need help, but more importantly, that my daughter should not be around him. My nephew's growing up in less than ideal circumstances with a father who has accusations of domestic violence and rape, as well as drug and pornography issues. I'm concerned that these influences may be affecting my nephew. The good news is my daughter told him no, and she thought that the request was gross, and she did not want to do that, and his dad stepped in before he could continue asking. My wife's family feels this is normal, and I'm just uneducated about child sexuality. Help! Well, we're sharing this letter because Dad really gave us a full picture of what's going on. The behaviors he described are specific and, of course, very concerning, and the experiences of his nephew helps us understand the scope of what could be going on. Also, just how wonderful that we could see how he must be teaching his own daughter about things like consent and how she knew to talk to her dad. And finally, he really shares with us the difficulty in seeing eye to eye with other adults. So these reasons on your screen for children's harmful sexual behaviors are taken from Tony Kavanaugh Johnson's work on children's sexual behavior problems. I know we said we're not going to go in depth here about how to treat harmful sexual behaviors or even diagnosing them, but we want to just share this to kind of continue our perspective of how this can happen.
Right, yeah. So, when a child does act in sexually concerning ways towards another child, in addition to the curiosity gone amok and impulse control problems that Jenny was mentioning, there's a number of more serious connections that might be made. Yes, some behaviors are impulsive and unplanned, while others are carefully thought out or strategized. The specific circumstances and the individual children involved must be taken into consideration when trying to understand the causes of sexual abuse among children and youth. So I want to pull out one of the pieces in Brad the Dad's letter about his nephew's experience. While we're of course not looking to excuse this child's behaviors, it's important to understand that these behaviors are most likely the symptom of something else. Brad's nephew really nails a few of these up on your screen.
Yeah. And I just want to interject here that generally our helpline's response to letters such as these wouldn't be to open with, well, there are probably reasons why your nephew did that. We recognize that this parent's concern is going to be first about the safety of his own child. It's really hard to think about that other child when it's your child who's been harmed. And while we didn't get this from Brad, Mike and I can tell you about many calls and letters from parents who often are very focused on what can be done to the child who has harmed their child, more in terms of things like justice or seeing this child as a threat that must be gotten off the streets. But, I really want to be honest here. When I'm talking with an angry parent or writing back to a parent that wants to see the child who harmed theirs punished with a jail sentence, I'm really aware that I have a kind of a hidden agenda to help this parent also hold this other child and to see that that child needs help. We try to share the perspective that while we need to, of course, focus on their own child's well-being, the focus on the other child as a monster is just not the answer. And it won't help them to support and show up and help their own child.
Yeah, and really, so perhaps by recognizing that the child who hurt their child is probably hurting themselves, a parent might be able to start to shift their own perspective and recognize the role they can play in a larger arena. So we can provide support and maybe prevent this child from a lifetime of hurting others or being hurt themselves or both. So for example, we'll say, I'm not trying to excuse this other child's behaviors. I want to help you attend to your daughter's needs. And I also want to make sure that we get this other child the help she needs so no one else gets hurt. So really, at the risk of being a little repetitive here, children's sexual behaviors are so very different from adults. And even though on our helpline, often the call is about the child who experienced the harmful behaviors, as we start to think about prevention and about healing and recovery, we want to take in all that could be going on. So we're going to address some of Brad the Dad's concerns about talking with other family members in a little bit, but now let's hear from another parent. Amit says, my 4-year-old daughter told their mom that my boss's 11-year-old son touched her inappropriately at a family work picnic this weekend. She said she tried to run away, but that he chased her and told her to kiss his penis. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I have no clue what I need to do for my daughter and how to address my boss or his son's behavior. I just started at the company a few months ago, but I'm so angry right now. So backing up a little bit from children's sexual behaviors themselves, we wanted to move on to how we respond after finding out that something has happened. So as Jenny said before, this is really perhaps a parent's worst nightmare, or at least one of them. At the very least, this is not something that we think of preparing to address. There's so many emotions that run together at the same time. But let's first talk about the response in that moment. Parents and caregivers in this situation really need to try and stay calm if they can. I know that this is a lot easier said than done, but children can really often pick up on some of the nonverbal cues that something is stressful to the important adults in their lives. Parents should take a breath and try to stay as neutral as possible. Parents should let the child know how fantastic it was that they spoke up, if they indeed spoke up, and praise them for their bravery, even if they waited months or years to talk about this. It's also really important that a child's experiences is both believed and validated. Children should know, children should also be told that this wasn't their fault and that they're not in trouble, and caregivers can tell them that they're sorry they were scared or hurt, confused, whatever it is that they're presenting with. Children should also know that this other youth's behavior certainly wasn't okay and it wasn't safe. And really, this should be clarified. It's important for kids to hear this, but in terms of safe and unsafe behaviors, if parents have a family safety plan in place, they can discuss what happened in terms of the rules they already have about body boundaries. I also want to mention here, it's really important to stay away from any charged words like dirty, bad, disgusting. And I want to pause and say, of course, it's normal for parents to feel repulsed, to feel put off or shocked by what they saw, but saying these things aloud to either child is actually not productive. In some situations, actually, the child who was hurt may still have a relationship with the other child. They may still like them. They might even look up to them. And it's really not going to help by saying anything negative about that child. That's really mostly for us as adults, kind of trying to make sense of this, looking for someone to blame or something to blame, and it's just not what kids need. They may not even feel harmed by a clearly sexually inappropriate behavior, so parents really should keep their reactions appropriate to their child's needs. Later, they certainly can also find a supportive person or a private place to share their raw feelings about the situation, whatever they may be.
Yeah, and just briefly after the discovery, of course, the thing we do is to continue to monitor, to follow up, and continue to plan for safety. We look for any impact on our child's behavior that could indicate that they're struggling to process what happened, or they feel unsafe, whether they feel scared, or might even be starting to act out themselves. So we're going to talk more about the follow-up specifically with the other parent in a moment, but always revisiting safety plans is a good idea. We want to know, was there anything in a particular situation that gave us information about what this child needs moving forward to feel safe? Are there rules that are confusing or that need to be adapted maybe because they haven't been changed since instituted when the child was a toddler and now that kid's in second grade? What else needs to be addressed?
Okay, so now that we've talked about some of the first steps parents should take after finding out that something has happened, we wanted to talk about some specific concerns that we hear on the helpline. Leah says, after a playdate with some family friends, my daughter explained in detail an adult sexual activity that she was coerced into by her friend who is also female. Is she now at risk for starting something with another kid? Should I get her into therapy? Yeah, so this is another really big worry for parents. If their child experienced harmful sexual behaviors or if mature sexual behaviors are forced on them, is their child now at risk to turn around and do this with someone else?
So let's do another poll. We're wondering if you all think that children who have been harmed sexually will go on to behave inappropriately with others. So you'll see yes, no, and unsure. So go ahead and start voting. Oh, here they come. Wow, people jumped right on this. A lot of no's. Oh, but it's shifting. It's like watching a race with one moving in front of the other.
Yeah. It's looking a lot more even now, split between yes and no. We have most everyone who's voted.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and share the poll?
Yeah, so once again, this poll is really mixed. We have some yeses, a little bit more no's, and of course, a lot of unsures.
Yeah. Well, this is a really big question, right? I mean, now that my child was exposed to inappropriate sexual behavior, will they go on to behave harmfully with other kids? I mean, overwhelmingly, the answer isn't certain. It's often no. And while there's a chance that kids who have been harmed will go on to continue the behaviors, act out what happened to them, most children who have been harmed do not go on to harm others. Yes, the data does tell us that juveniles and adults, for that matter, who sexually harm kids often have been sexually abused themselves. But it's also true, and research bears this out, that being sexually abused does not automatically mean that a child will become someone who abuses others. And even if we know that, though, we still worry. How children process this experience can vary widely, and children are resilient. When children are responded to calmly and with a positive response from caring adults, this becomes a protective factor. What we can do as parents and caring adults in children's lives is to believe them and validate their story, as Micah said, and strengthen our safety plan. And this is true, again, if the abuser is an adult or whether it's another youth. And too often, even with the more extreme of harmful behaviors, even if it is child to child, there can still be a tendency to respond with less urgency and less concern. Now, I know while this may seem unlikely to this informed audience, and we've been sharing letters from folks who really do recognize the harm that's happening, we do still need to help many parents recognize that, yes, children can really hurt other children and they need our help. This is especially true for the child who was hurt to have their experience validated. Too often on our helpline, we actually do hear from adults who were hurt sexually by another child, but when they told someone, their parents or another adult, too often the response was, just don't play with them anymore. So in follow-up conversations with this child, it can be helpful to talk about what's happened within the context of the family safety plan, acknowledging that what happened wasn't safe, that there was a rule that was broken, what the rule was, and that they did the right thing by telling what happened, because this can further help this child, their friend, and just in general reinforces healthy behaviors for both of them.
Yeah, and like Jenny said, children are really resilient. And as children's sexual behaviors are different than adults, likewise, their responses to experiencing sexual harm can be different as well. That doesn't mean we don't stay engaged. We certainly do. But there isn't one typical response from a child that we're going to see. Instead, be on the lookout for a range of behavior from children, and many kids are not impacted in any long-lasting detrimental way, particularly with one-time situations, and especially with the response that we outlined earlier, that really protective, nurturing, validating response. Many kids experience this as just another blip in their life. So sometimes they may act like nothing's changed. And to a child, it's possible that nothing has actually changed to them. It's possible that this experience wasn't traumatic to them. And since kids don't have the same context for sex and sexual behaviors as we adults do, it's possible that they don't see what happened as any different than if another child engaged in a different non-sexual boundary crossing behavior with them, like hitting them or stealing their toy. Actually, it's not the incident itself that often has the negative impact, but rather how it's handled afterwards. And so that means that, a child may still want to play with this other child, and not being able to is what's most traumatic to them. Now, whether they do or not is up to the parent, of course, but if this other child is their good friend and both parents are able to agree on supervision where children will always be playing in the presence of parents, perhaps joining together on what safety planning rules both families have, then yeah, certainly it is possible that these kids can continue to play together. And we certainly are cautious about, advising folks one way or another on our helpline about this, because we know that we may not have the whole story. Actually, we rarely do. And there may be an extended history of problems or other family situations that really do mean that we need to be very vigilant, and that allowing these children to play together or even just being anywhere together may need to be avoided, at least in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, kids may wonder if they're in trouble or if their friend, their friend who touched them or hurt them is in trouble, and they worry about this. They may not want their friend or their cousin to get punished. Again, talking with kids through the language of their family safety plan can be really helpful. We can say something like, Brandon broke a really important safety rule. It's important that he gets some help so that he doesn't ignore these rules again or hurt someone. He may have some consequences for breaking a rule. And for now, while the adults figure out how to help him and to also help you, you guys aren't going to be able to play together. It's also possible that this incident may leave them, of course, with questions. There may be some new confusion about acceptable behaviors or just in general about sex and bodies. So, of course, we're going to be prepared, supportive, and not shy away from the difficult questions. This will be an important time for parents to help them with accurate information. And remember that sometimes, even though a child may not be displaying any signs of stress right now, right after an occurrence of harmful sexual behaviors with another child, we're going to keep an eye out now and going down the line. Sometimes once a child hits puberty or grows into adolescence or early adulthood, the inappropriate or harmful sexualized experience they had may now become a source of stress, confusion, or even shame to them. And then absolutely we want to get a counselor involved. And of course, there may also be some serious concerning behavioral signs as a result of what happened, and then it becomes necessary to reach out for help. But let's first do another poll.
Yeah, so this is our last poll for you guys. Do you think that children who have experienced inappropriate or harmful sexual behaviors from another youth automatically needs to get into therapy because they've been hurt in some way? So again, please vote yes, no, or unsure. Looks like we have all no's so far. Getting some yeses in.
Okay. Yep, the no's are still holding their own here. All right, why don't we close that poll and show the final results. So this is a big question. Has the child been harmed? And I, in a way, I'm kind of glad to see that we have a lot of no's, meaning that we just don't know. The possibility is there that a child could be harmed, but we don't want to automatically assume that. I mean, we hear these questions, should we go out and get them a therapist? Something happened. And I appreciate that parents are thinking more about professional and specialized help for their kids. And these parents have this fear that their child has been irreversibly harmed. Now, of course, we don't diagnose on the helpline, but we do help folks determine how to help care for their child. And sometimes therapy is pretty quickly indicated. And sometimes, as we just shared, the response of the child is actually unremarkable. There's more concern for the relationship and being able to keep playing. Sometimes to a child it's clear that they didn't like what happened, they don't want to play anymore with the other child or be around that child. But other than that, again, there's nothing remarkable in their behaviors or their presentation. So we may recommend waiting and watching, just being alert and vigilant. Sometimes it feels like giving parents permission to not rush to put their child in therapy if it hasn't been indicated. For some parents, putting their child in therapy may be more of a way for them to take care of how they're feeling. It's not unreasonable for us to suggest that some parents, their own professional support system may be really helpful. There's nothing to rock a parent's sense of security and well-being like feeling like their child's been harmed and that maybe they let them down because they couldn't protect them. So always, we do want parents to know if there are any concerns at all about their child, if they're just not sure whether they are seeing anything different in their behaviors and their emotions, their feelings, their attitudes, that they should consult with a counselor, or maybe even they can start with their pediatrician. With a counselor, though, we certainly always recommend finding one experienced with normative childhood development, and if possible, with a counselor experienced in children's sexual behavior specifically.
So just to expand a little bit on, what Jenny said, therapy and the question of whether it is necessary, it doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all answer. Not every child who experiences harmful sexual behaviors will need therapy, but yeah, some do. And so we want to be on the lookout for warning signs. This first column on the left-hand side are non-sexualized signs that a child may be struggling with some difficult feelings or memories from some sort of incident they experienced. So this would be things like you're noticing changes in their emotions, their behavior, their development, anything that's really new or different for them. The second column on the right-hand side are sexualized behaviors. These are signs that a child may now be having trouble understanding safe sexual limits when engaging with other kids. And, like we were saying, though, most children don't go on to harm others. Sometimes kids are confused about what safe boundaries look like, or they may have now acquired some unsafe coping skills after an incident. So when in doubt, parents always should bring their child to their pediatrician and ask for their input. This will, of course, rule out another medical cause for their behavior, sexual or otherwise, and they can also help find a counselor who's specialized. And so, with our prevention lens, let's now move on to helping parents take what we hope is a really important step. And this step is to help the child who has behaved harmfully. Really, a key way to do that is to talk to a child's parents. You've seen many of the letters already ask, do I talk to the parents? And how do I talk to the parents? We're even noting that they have already had one conversation with the parents and need to prep for a second. In some cases, it may seem obvious that a conversation is needed, but we've also seen many letters say, I wish I had done something sooner. And there certainly is some dread about having this talk, even informed parents who realize that this is probably a child who needs some help. And the questions that we hear are not actually about arrest or punishment, but rather, what could really be going on for this child? They too dread this conversation. In our heads, it can sound like we're making an accusation. And again, there's that really big yuck factor in talking about sex and children in the same breath. And that's normal. It seems likely that, it may be a difficult discussion and that a parent may feel like their child is being accused of something monstrous. Perhaps they'll feel like they're being accused of something themselves. And it's also possible that these other parents won't see eye to eye on the seriousness of the situation, or even think that the child is making it up or that they're the cause of what happened. Likely, no matter what, it's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, but not impossible. And it's so very important. Parents need to know what's up with their kids, right? If we can help them recognize that their own child may need some extra help and support, that gets us in the right direction of early response. It's possible that this kid's parent isn't aware that their child has been sexually inappropriate with other children or has any sexually concerning behaviors at all. So by bringing this up, it gives them now the opportunity to find out more, maybe to seek help, to talk to their child, and to plan for safety. If you recall, one of Brad the dad's concerns was that his relatives do not think that the behaviors of his nephew are concerning and that Brad himself is uneducated about children's sexuality. And sometimes these conversations can be a chance to share information, accurate information about children's sexual behaviors and about their development too. While just sharing information won't always convince the other person, of course, we can always invite that person then to do their own research, ask their own questions, but to find out more. We can also invite them to check out resources on children's sexual behaviors and normal sexual development. Also, it's possible that this child could be the victim of undisclosed abuse. And by bringing their behaviors to their parents' awareness, we're now opening up the chance that this child will receive help if there is something abusive going on. If we don't talk about this, obviously, then this child's harmful behaviors could continue or progress, and another child might be harmed, and this own child's harm to themselves, it expands. So when parents don't know what's normal, they may not understand when behavior is becoming worrisome. So by pointing all of this out in a non-threatening and caring conversation, we're hoping that we can support parents and reinforce the need for them to address their children's behaviors in a non-threatening way, that they don't feel like they have to defend, but rather can see that, oh, there's something we need to pay attention to. It doesn't mean that there's something horrific, but it means it needs our attention. So also, sorry, I had to take a breath there. Not all parents feel comfortable talking about children's sexual behaviors, right? And parents, like anybody else, can feel really isolated. Like, who do they talk to this about? They may actually be aware that there is a problem, but they just don't even know where to go or how to ask for help. So again, this conversation can help reduce their isolation. It's another opportunity, and it helps parents feel less alone. Both groups of parents then can be allies together in their children's safety. In many ways, this is the heart of primary prevention, including perpetration prevention. By having these difficult conversations, we're taking active steps to prevent future harm. And of course, we recognize that this may not always be prudent to have a conversation. There may be other challenges, and safety has to be considered, of course. We'll briefly come back to that type of situation.
Great. So let's hear from Brenna now. Brenna says, I just walked in on my niece, 8 years old, with her pants down, asking my daughter, who's 9, to touch her. My daughter has severe developmental delays and struggles to express herself and her needs. I worry that because my daughter looks up to her, she wouldn't have been able to say no. My sister's daughter is also very bossy and typically is the leader in all her social groups. Should I be worried? I already am, actually, but what do I do from here? I don't think my sister will be able to understand that her perfect child may have done something wrong. How do I address this without causing more damage in my family? So you guys can really see that she, Brenna here is anticipating a difficult conversation, a conversation that might not go smoothly. And yet she's also aware that this is really an important step. Now we want to kind of use Brenna's situation to think about these conversations just a little bit more.
Yeah, we're going to do a role play of this in a moment, but first, let's go over some tips on how to have this conversation. And you will find in your email and your handouts, Talking with Parents About Children's Sexual Behaviors, a tip sheet on our website. So first, of course, prepare beforehand. What do you want to say? How do you want to say it? Like all anticipated difficult conversations, going in cold is not really such a great idea. So when you do take some time to think about how you want to say what you want to say, to choose your words, maybe practice with someone, it's likely that the conversation has a better chance of landing well, that you'll be heard, and hopefully that action steps can be taken. And also a side note, just of course, we always want to make sure that these types of conversations are private and away from kids, right? So it's normal for parents to have that kind of knee-jerk reaction to hearing that their child did something sexually inappropriate to another child. I mean, that's pretty normal. Nobody wants to hear something negative about their kid. So give them a second to feel their feelings. As most likely, if you're having the conversation, have those same difficult feelings, or anybody having this conversation would have that kind of shocked, immediate feeling as well. So it may be helpful to validate what they're saying and even their shock, like, yes, I know it's hard to believe, and I was really surprised too. But you don't have to stick around for any verbal abuse. So if things do get confrontational, we always advise parents to end the talk calmly, and just recognize that it's not possible to take this kind of step of having this conversation. But if you've made it this far, then we want to present a we're on the same side approach, meaning what do you both share in common? A love for your kids, most likely, right? So say that. If you can, maybe even start with something nice about their child. You're not trying to kiss up, you're just trying to set a pleasant tone. You and this other parent often really are on the same side. Parents usually want the best for the kids that they love, right? So think of an opener that can bring the shared values together. Miranda, I know you and I both adore our kids, and I think Brandon is pretty special. So even if you both disagree about what constitutes sexual abusive behaviors, you can probably both agree that you both care for your kids and want the best for them.
Right, so another important piece that we have here is to stick to the facts. You want to describe behaviors, not intentions. You want to avoid judgments, labels, criticism, and certainly avoid comparing one child to another. Parents should describe what they have either personally witnessed or what their child has reported to them. So a parent may say something like, Dennis told me that Brandon pushed him into the bathroom when we were at church together this weekend and had him touch his penis, and that he had done this 2 other times. It can be helpful to then add, I care about Brandon. Dennis was scared and this was serious, and I knew as a good parent you would want to know right away so that you can help Brandon with safe behaviors and whatever might be going on for him. It's also really great to share resources and help and information. We certainly always encourage folks who call in, who write in or chat with us to feel free to share our own website, tip sheets, guidebooks, to even share the number to our helpline with the other parents so that they can have their questions answered too. And these caregivers may even want to consider creating a safety plan together. In fact, this sometimes can be a must-have part of the conversation and maybe even potentially the most difficult part.
Yeah. Perhaps there's been a decision that the kids cannot play together, be together. Excuse me. If this conversation is between close families or friends, there may just be no getting around this being very difficult, and it may well have some long-term relationship consequences. I mean, we hear this on our helpline all the time. Parents who are trying to figure out how to arrange it so that their child is never around the other child, and the recognition that their friendship or even family relationships may be permanently changed. We can't tell any parent a way to make this easy and all better. We certainly validate the decision they feel they need to make, and we always encourage taking things one step at a time because things could change in the future. As a side note, what we really wish is that parents always know the parents of the kids who are in their lives, and that they even work together early on, making a pact with each other that states any adult who sees something concerning in any of their children will make a phone call right away, and that there's a don't blame the messenger agreement.
Okay, we wanted to do a quick role play for you guys with our last case example here with Brenna. She was concerned because she walked in on her niece asking her developmentally delayed child to touch her private areas. She was a little worried about how to frame this for her sister so she wouldn't be offended. Jenny is going to play Brenna, and I will be playing Jessie, the sister.
So we're just, hi everybody.
All right. Hey. Okay.
All right.
Hey, Brenna, I got out a little early today, and since I was tired, that really was a godsend. So how are the kids? Did the day go okay?
Yeah, but Jesse, there is something I need to talk to you about, and it has to do with the kids. So Joe's watching the kids out back, and I'm wondering if we could talk before you take off.
Yeah, okay. I mean, should I be worried? This seems awful formal for just an update on their day.
No, don't worry. Excuse me. They all have their limbs, but with all seriousness, it is important, and so I am looking forward to talking to you.
Shoot, what is it?
All right. Well, so this isn't so easy for me. I'm not even sure where to start. You know how much I love Franny. She's smart, articulate. She knows how to ask for what she wants. I mean, she's like a little version of you. Ada looks up to her, and I love watching them play together. I know how hard you've worked to have open communication with her, and you're such a good and protective parent. And I want to share something with you that happened today, and I know that you would share something like this with me if it were to ever happen. But today they were in Ada's room with the door closed, and when I walked in to tell them that lunch was ready, I saw that Franny had her pants down and was asking Ada to touch her.
What? No way. Franny wouldn't do that.
Listen, I don't want you to think I'm saying Franny is bad or that there's a problem with her or anything like that, and I know this is really difficult to hear.
Are you serious?
Okay, look, take a breath. I know this is a lot to take in, and honestly, it was a shock for me too. I had to take a huge breath and collect myself for a second, but then I calmly talked to them both and reminded them of the safety rules, and now I want to talk to you because while it's normal for children to be curious, I am concerned. Ada just isn't at the same level as Franny. She's like a 3-year-old in a 9-year-old's body, and I know she often goes along with whatever Franny wants.
Okay, but this is crazy. Franny, she's such a goody two-shoes. Why would she do that? What was she thinking? Are you sure Ada didn't start it?
Yeah, I wondered all those same things too. I had some questions, and so when I talked to them separately, they both pretty much told me the same story. Franny was a little hesitant at first, but she admitted she had tried this before with a friend who didn't want to play the game, so that ended that the first time. But then she thought that Ada might be game for it, and Ada was and went along. So I let them both know that they're not in trouble. I'm really proud of them for being honest and telling me the truth. I was really careful not to shame either of them, and I told them that I was going to talk to you as well.
Okay, wow, this is a lot.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? I talked to this place called Stop It Now, and they did walk me through some really helpful next steps. I mean, for example, I didn't realize I didn't have the best safety plan in place. I didn't think twice about letting them play with the doors closed. But really, how could I have kept an eye on them that way? So now we're keeping a doors open rule whenever there's a play date happening. I can show you this tip sheet they sent me. I think it'd be really helpful if maybe we even have the same set of rules at your place and at mine. And, you know, they said you can give them a call too if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I always just trusted that Franny had really great instincts on this kind of stuff because we always talk about no adult should ever touch your privates at home. But I guess I never told her that she shouldn't ask other kids to touch her. And if I'm being really honest with myself, I have been ignoring some warning signs. I think I'll give her pediatrician a call.
Yeah, I mean, this has all left me kind of stunned, but you know, strangely, I actually feel better prepared now, and I'm so glad that you're going to follow up and that you're taking this seriously, and I really appreciate you being so understanding.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, I'm gonna go get Franny and then we're gonna do some shopping, but I'll definitely check out those links, give my pediatrician a call. Can you email those links to me?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to, you know, I'm happy to talk more later.
Okay. Sounds great. See you later.
All right. Great. So you heard our scripted talk, and yes, this conversation did end well, and we promise that we're going to show you more difficult questions in future webinars. But we still wanted to present this model because not all conversations, you know, do end well, and sometimes it may take more than one talk to get through. Sometimes you have to end the conversation early to let someone process what you've said, but then unless it's unsafe, you know, you may want to try to follow up again. It's okay to say, I can see you're upset. You know, I really care about your family, about your kids and my kids, all of us. But I can wait to talk more about this later because it is important and I do want to talk again. So, and just jumping to the end of this list on your screen, maybe the conversation or follow-up conversation just can't happen at all. The parent, for whatever reason, just can't show up for this type of conversation. There may be other folks involved who can follow up then, the school, a coach, another relative. It may be serious enough that a report to Child Protection Services is necessary. And I know I did see a question or two about reporting. And so parents will still have to think about whether or not that's the right step. They're thinking about their safety plan for their child. And if it can't include talking to their parents and it's a difficult situation and they feel that they need to take some sort of action, they may decide that they need to reach out to CPS, to Child Protection Services. It's not about getting the child arrested, but you know, rather a concern that a child's at risk to hurt other folks or him or herself, and for whatever reason isn't getting that adequate parental intervention and support. Also, a big question we often get is, should I tell the school? And this, of course, depends. Though the school may not be able to intervene per se, there are times when this is important. If two children are in the same class and the child who experienced the inappropriate behaviors is expressing fear or anxiety around this other kid, then that would be a good reason to talk to the school and see how they can help with accommodations. Also, sometimes people just don't see eye to eye on what's safe or what's harmful and dangerous. It may be that lack of education about sexuality development or just denial about the seriousness of kids' behaviors. So it may be helpful to suggest consulting with a specialist, as we said earlier, a pediatrician, school counselor, bring in other resources if the other parent persists in thinking that there's nothing wrong.
Yeah, another really big one that we hear from parents who are worried, they continue to be worried because the kid who hurt their child continues to play with other children, often unsupervised, and there's a concern that other youth could be approached inappropriately. If a parent doesn't seem to be taking any action and this child continues to play without adequate supervision around kids, it's possible that a parent may want to think about having a caring conversation about safety with the other parents. Again, although we don't feel comfortable recommending that other outside people are notified specifically about a child's own sexual behaviors, often a nice kind of like backdoor idea is to just generally share information about safety planning and safe rules for kids, because then it'll be easier to talk about children who may need help with these rules. So this would not be to shame a child or to ostracize them, of course, but when a child's having trouble with safe sexual limits and other youth could be at risk, additional awareness and supervision is important. And yeah, so Jen brought up reporting. It sounds like we might have even had a question about reporting, and it certainly is a confusing area. While, it's not often that children's sexual behaviors, even harmful and abusive ones involving kids under the age of 12, will be investigated or even charged, there are benefits to reporting. As Jenny talked about, if there's a concern that a parent isn't responding to their kid's own problematic sexual behaviors, particularly those hurting another kid, it may help to get professionals in there to help the family. And sometimes the behaviors are just so serious that even when a parent is trying to be responsive and trying to make sure that their child isn't hurting anyone else, there's just too many concerns, and it's important to bring in professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see actually we are near the end of we're over time by 2 minutes. I'm appreciative that you're all staying, and I see a great question I'm going to get to, but I want to let folks know there's some resources online. You'll find them in the handouts that we've included as well. And we are going to go ahead and wrap up. Remember to do our survey, and you will get a follow-up email with links to the recording and materials. We're going to stay on for another 5 minutes or so to just see if there are any questions. But again, we realize we've gone over time, and we thank you so much for hanging in there with us. And so go ahead and chat in some questions, and we'll try to get to them the best that we can. Thanks so much.
It looks like I see one. It says, I've seen research about sexual abuse and the links to mental and physical health later in life. Is this a good reason to assume that every child should receive some sort of treatment? Maybe they don't have any warning signs of needing therapy right away, but what if it's affecting them internally in ways we can't detect?
Yeah, it's a great question. And generally we would say if you have any concerns at all, consult with a counselor. You can go in on your own without your child and just talk about what would be the most protective next course. But I do want to say that it's just not every child who has experienced or been a victim of sexual harmful behavior from another child. I don't think that one incident alone is enough to say now this child has to go to therapy, because in some ways we're helping that child create meaning out of what happened to them. We don't want to downplay it. We don't want to overplay it. We want to respond to where they're at. So again, it's really important to just monitor, to ask questions, to consult, and to I guess just show up for where your kid is at the moment. I just tangled up my mouth, so I'll stop now, Mike.
Yeah, no, I mean, something that I often say on the helpline is, sometimes if you are worried, if you don't know how to respond, because we don't know how the child's responding, sometimes like Jenny said, it can be a good idea just to get a professional in there to get their read of the situation. They're not going to go in and re-traumatize the child. If they're a specialist, look for someone who's experienced in working with child sexual abuse. It may be that, 2 sessions later, they say, this is fine. It doesn't seem like this is bothering them. They haven't brought anything up. And that'll be that. And, you can just kind of keep on the lookout for warning signs in the future or revisit it, if needed.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions come in. Of course, folks are welcome to write us, contact us with any other questions. We really appreciate y'all for, again, hanging in there with us, and we hope y'all go on to have a great rest of your day, and thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.